This is Neil Grayston from Eureka.
This is Jaime Paglia, and you are watching the TV Writer Podcast.
7, 6,
5, 4. We have main engine start. 2, 1.
Booster ignition and liftoff.
Countdown to launch. Fall TV 2010 on the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide. I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, Episode 4 for Monday, September 13th, 2010. This is a weekly video podcast that brings you interviews with working TV writers and also helpful resources, whether you're working in the TV industry already or you're trying to break in. I'm your host, Gray Jones. I've got a bachelor's degree in screenwriting from York University here in Toronto, and I've also won awards internationally for my short film producing. I currently work as a reality TV editor and writer here in Toronto. Before we get to the final part of our series on the crossover between Warehouse 13 and Eureka, I'd like to tell you about a couple of resources. Firstly, you probably know that we get work in this business from networking. On that note, I am very pleased to announce that the TV Writer Twitter database is now live at tvwriterpodcast.com. It already lists over 340 writers, and many more are added every day. It's a tremendous resource already and can only get better. I do need your help. Please check the list, and if you're a produced TV writer who is not listed, please let me know right away. An email link is at the top of the page. Also, please tweet about this resource. Put it on your Facebook. Tell all your friends and colleagues. Why get on the list? It can help people find you and also help you find other writers. Both are things that can lead to work. Also, it helps you get followers, which means you can interact more directly with fans of your work. You can check it out at tvwriterpodcast.com. And also you can follow me on Twitter for the latest updates. At Gray Jones is my handle. And one big reason that you might want to follow me as well on Twitter is that that's the place that I call for questions when I'm going to interview somebody. So say I'm going to introduce the showrunner of your favorite show. I'm going to announce it on Twitter and maybe give a day or two for people to submit questions. So if you follow me on Twitter, you can know when that's going to be and you can get your questions in. A second resource that I wanted to tell you about is the On the Page podcast with Pilar Alessandra. Pilar Alessandra is a well-known teacher and script consultant, and she's produced almost 160 episodes of her podcast called On the Page about the craft and business of screenwriting. I've listened to almost all of them and highly recommend them as a writing resource. Recently, Pilar moved to premium podcasting, which means that you need to pay a small fee for the podcasts. The sound quality is improved, and they also give helpful worksheets and other resources to premium subscribers. The cost is only $20 for 6 months, and I highly, highly recommend it. They're very much worth it. You can follow Pilar on Twitter. At On The Page is her handle, and she gives script tips almost every day. For more information, you can go to onthepage.tv for this excellent, excellent resource. The last resource that I told you about a few episodes ago is my other podcast, Chuck versus the Podcast for NBC's Chuck. You can find that at chuckpodcast.com. And the reason I mentioned it this week is because on Wednesday of this week, I'm going to be releasing an interview with Chuck co-creator Chris Fedak. You'll definitely want to hear that interview. And as well, there are many, many other interviews with writers from that show. And some of them have even gone on to other shows after that. So it's a great resource. Just look for the tag writers on the website, and you can find some great interviews that can help fill the gaps between releases of the TV Writer Podcast. But now, on to Eureka. Created by Andrew Cosby and Jaime Paglia, Eureka was the highest-rated series launch in sci-fi's 14-year history when it first aired in July 2006. Produced by Universal, it has been a strong performer for sci-fi ever since. And it has been just renewed for a 5th season, despite being only midway through Season 4. Shot in Vancouver, Canada, Wikipedia describes Eureka like this. Set in a fictional town called Eureka, Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest, inhabited almost entirely by genius and scientists. Nearly everyone in Eureka works for Global Dynamics, a huge advanced research facility responsible for the development of all major technological breakthroughs in the last 50 years. Each episode features a mysterious, accidental, or intentional misuse of technology, which is then solved by the town sheriff, Jack Carter, with the help of town scientists. Eureka is quirky and fun, kind of like Northern Exposure meets The X-Files. I've watched it since season 1 and am loving it all the way. As mentioned in the 2 previous podcasts, Eureka recently had a crossover with Sci-Fi's hit Warehouse 13, which gave each show a boost in the ratings not just for the crossover, but also subsequent episodes. Today, I'm pleased to bring you 2 interviews, the first with Eureka co-creator and showrunner Jaime Paglia, and the second with actor Neil Grayston, who plays Douglas Fargo on the show, and was the actor who crossed over to Warehouse 13. Stick around after the interviews as I'll give you some information about how you can contact the Eureka writers and also some of the actors from the show. Now on to my interview with Eureka showrunner Jaime Paglia. Enjoy. So, this is Gray Jones, and I'm here with co-creator, executive producer, and showrunner of Eureka on Sci-Fi, Jaime Paglia. How you doing, Jaime?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on, Gray.
Yeah, and I want to say, first of all, congratulations on getting picked up for a 5th season.
Yeah, we're very excited, obviously. It's been, I think, a particularly just great season for all of us creatively. We've been having a lot of fun, and it's been terrific to see the fan and the critics' responses. But obviously having the network make that into something tangible with a season 5 pickup was definitely a nice way to end the season.
Mm-hmm. And this way you can start planning a little earlier.
Definitely, we're kind of just rolling right into it. We've already been discussing what we were going to be driving to in season 5, and the back 10 episodes, they still have not determined when they're going to air them. I'm really hoping that they'll air in the first quarter of next year, but there's always that possibility that they'll hold on to them until the summertime. But that those 10 episodes are really sort of a continuation of where we're going to end up in this sort of 2-part finale that we have tonight's episode, and then next, I guess September 10th is when the finale will air. But we've had a plan that we were driving to that we were able to run the network through a couple of weeks ago, and I think that they had said that they were a little concerned. They didn't quite know how we were going to top ourselves after this season with surprises. And then they were happy to say that we managed to do it again for them. So at least conceptually, they were very excited by the direction that we're heading.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to see it, and we'll get more to Eureka, but first, I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of the beginning end, how you started, where you grew up, and when did you first know that you wanted to write?
Wow, I still haven't figured out whether I really want to write. It's always a painful process. No, I think that I really embraced it more in college, and shortly after I sort of started working in Hollywood. I did grow up in a very small town in Pacific Northwest. I was born in Los Angeles, but I spent the majority of my childhood up in Warrenton, Oregon, a population, I think, 2,200 when I was there. Mm-hmm. And my graduating class from high school was 38, and I went to UC Santa Cruz and was in the English Lit and Theater Arts programs, and was writing and playwriting, creative writing both, and then came down to Hollywood, just not quite sure where in the mix I wanted to be. And after a couple of years in feature film publicity at MGM, I was developing some projects with my wife, my now wife, my then girlfriend, Kristen, and we wrote a feature script together, and that got us an agent. And then she decided to go off to Harvard and be a doctor of education and get a real job, and I was still slumming it, and sold a couple of features with other writing partners of mine, Dave Draffin and then Andy Cosby, and then Andy and I sat down for lunch one day, and he had an opportunity in television and said, well, if we were going to do a show, what would you do? And I hadn't really thought about television, honestly. I was so focused on writing features at that point, and I said, well, I guess I'd probably do something that's sort of in the vein of Northern Exposure. I really could connect with that show, and I like the sensibility. It's my sense of humor too, and that sort of, quirky, eccentric character that I've personally liked to write the most. And sort of coming from a playwriting background, you just give me two people and put them on a stage, and I'll just write that all day. It was sort of a lot more my comfort zone, and being someone who appreciated science fiction, Andy was also, he's sort of a true sci-fi geek, and he was coming, I think, more from that perspective of, the X-Files and the Outer Limits, Twilight Zone kind of perspective, and we sort of married, I think, our two sensibilities a bit, and we went through some old ideas and came up with one that had originally been conceived of as a half-hour animated idea, and we sort of said, well, what if we take that and we actually, we do it as live action and expand it into an hour and find some pieces of it that we could really attach ourselves to as an audience member. And by the end of lunch, we literally had come up with a small secret government think tank in the Pacific Northwest that doesn't appear on any maps, and following a U.S. Marshal who stumbles into town transporting a prisoner and helps save the day, and then it ends up being assigned to be the town sheriff. And that premise was, really what I sort of went off with and started to develop, and we eventually sold to Sci-Fi.
Great. Now, I'm a little bit curious. You did have a little bit of science in your background. You are program director on a show called Cambridge Forum.
Yeah, that's right. It was fantastic. My father's a scientist. I grew up, with definitely that sort of world represented, and playing in his lab at UCLA. He was a pathologist and hematologist professor over there for 45 years, I think. And then when Christy was getting her doctorate back east, and we were living in Cambridge, and I was at that point I had sold a feature film to Akiva Goldsman that I was co-writing, and she was like, you really got to get a job here. I'm just up classes, and leaving me in our little tiny 400 square foot 1-bedroom apartment in Harvard Square, and just like, you need to get out of this house. I can't take it. And so she went online and at Harvard and found that there was an offer for this part-time position, and it was just perfect. It was the best thing ever because I got to be the program director for Cambridge Forum, which was this long-running public affairs lecture series that they did in Harvard Square at the First Parish Church in Cambridge. Durkee was the executive director, and I basically had this forum to be able to invite scholars, intellectuals, sometimes actors, writers, professors in various fields, to come in and talk on a particular topic that had to do with social or public policy, and design these programs. And it was getting a chance to meet some of the most amazing people and talk to them, interview them in front of a live audience, and then we would edit those down to half-hour broadcasts that went out on NPR and NPR affiliates every week. And they've been doing these programs in Cambridge for 50 years now, and so it was this great, unbelievable sort of resource for meeting some of these people. I mean, getting to sit down and interview people like Tim Berners-Lee, who actually did create the World Wide Web, or Rodney Brooks from the MIT robotics lab, who put Sojourner on Mars, sort of on and on. These amazing, Noam Chomsky and Howard Gardner's been on the show, and just an amazing array of people over the years. But they are sometimes very unique personalities. And we try very hard on the show to do justice to our characters and keep them grounded, our scientists, and not in any way perpetuate stereotypes or caricatures. And it's fun to be able to sort of mine those experiences for people that we end up creating for the show.
Yeah.
As I've said, their brains sometimes work differently. Tim Berners-Lee, his mouth literally cannot keep up with his brain. He talks so fast. And at some point, it's like, Tim, you got to slow down for the rest of us. We can't decipher what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing experience. I was there for about 5 years.
Yeah. Well, that really shows in the show, I think. I know I grew up a little bit of a science and math geek myself, and one of the things that I really connected with Eureka in the beginning was these were people, and people that I just believed. As much as it was humorous and as much as there was this fantastical element of these strange devices and things, then you had a really real-looking person operating the device, and it was what pulled me into the show.
Oh, I'm very happy to hear that. It's something that we're definitely cognizant of, and we have a staff of writers who are very interested. If they're not, card-carrying sci-fi geeks themselves, most of them have either some background or really great interest in just the field of science and technology, and they do a lot of their own research. Bruce Miller, who is co-show running the show with me this year, he loves to do that. He loves to just go off and dig into researching a particular area on the internet and coming up with something great. We have a lot of fun, I think, in those early stages of coming up with an idea and then trying to find a way to ground it in something that's real. And then Kevin Grazer, our science advisor at JPL, keeps us honest.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also you have a little bit of a break in that Colin Ferguson playing the everyman is how you enter the world. And so you always have that. He's got to break it down into layman's terms. And I think that helps the audience to be able to not be scared away by the science.
Yeah, exactly. It's that balance between wanting to make sure that the tech talk is as accurate as you can make it, but also have it be understandable and relatable for a layperson. And that's always the balance that I think we try to to strike in especially explaining what it is that's actually happening.
Mm-hmm. And another balance that you have to strike is the tone. Maybe you could talk a little bit about maintaining that. Like, it's comedy, it's quirky, but at the same time you do have some intense situations and drama.
I mean, I think for all of us, and I'll only speak for myself, but for me, in coming into creating the series, it was really important that at the heart of an episode, the A-story science problem really wasn't what it was about. That it's ultimately about our characters, and it's about whatever those conflicts or struggles that they're going through. And that ideally any episode really should be able to stand on its own if you were to strip away the science, and you would still care. And then we have the sort of added advantage of this toy box that we get to play in with with the sci-fi tech of it that can be the catalyst that helps those particular thematic dramas play out. And we do look for ways to sort of have those tie in thematically when we're breaking down episodes. But for me, I think that it's my sense of humor, but it's also I like to sort of try to use the comedy as a release of tension for our show. That if you have this hyper realistic backdrop of the town that if you're not careful can pull you out of your investment, I think, in the series, and that the characters and what they're feeling, whatever emotions that they're going through, tragedy that they're going through, elation, that they are the ones that ground us and make us really care about the show. But at the same time, we try not to take ourselves too seriously. I think that where I think we sort of have found an audience and they've embraced us and we've been very grateful for it was that we're sort of doing something that wasn't quite the norm. There some of the shows that were our favorite shows, the Battlestar Galactica and Star Trek: The Next Generation, and in other like shows that were more in the space opera world, they were definitely dramas. There wasn't a lot of humor there, and I think for us, we wanted to be able to laugh at ourselves a little bit and have our characters laugh at each other a bit, and that. So it is for me that I think that the comedy is it gives you a little extra suspension of disbelief and release of tension in a moment, ideally, where you're really sort of engaged with our characters in some truly emotional way. Yeah.
I don't know if you know, I also have done a podcast for Chuck on NBC for a long time. And that's a show that it's very funny. There's lots of great action, really, really great characters, but it's at times tough to describe. And there's a lot of people who just haven't discovered the show, and once they discover it, they're like, wow, this is a cool new world. How did I miss this? I mean, obviously you're doing great numbers for sci-fi, but do you find it's hard to explain the concept to people sometimes?
I know that we were kind of forging some new territory in this sci-fi dramedy kind of hybrid. It wasn't something that I think we were really cognizant of in terms of, the early days. It really was just, we have this idea that we really kind of like, and then these characters start to come to life, and you like them, and then you once you cast them and you see who's actually saying those lines, and they're bringing those characters, really to new heights. You start to just realize that you're going in some new directions. So I guess in describing the show, I really just sort of think of it as it's a small town eccentric, dramedy that has elements of science fiction. I don't think of us as a sci-fi show necessarily. It's not what comes to mind for me first. I think that one of the benefits that we've had for the Sci-Fi Channel has been that, well, as Mark Stern said when he bought the pitch from us, he said, I didn't quite know what we didn't have in our schedule until I heard this one, because it was an original dramedy that was Earth-based, so you could bring in, ideally, audience members that wouldn't necessarily be the first ones to jump onto another space opera or a more traditional sci-fi kind of concept. That ideally, for me, again, it was like, okay, I think that most people have, if they don't have a personal sort of connection to the dynamics of a small town, they're at least aware of what a quintessential small town sort of seems like it would be, and the kinds of dramas and conflicts of those people in those idealistic kinds of communities, would experience. And so it was relatable in a way that didn't require you to be necessarily a fan of science fiction. And we were able to bring over millions of new viewers to the channel who hadn't come to see Sci-Fi Channel necessarily because they weren't looking to go to a sci-fi show. They sparked to the concept of the show. And one of the I think the most frequent comments that we got early on and still do. I mean, it's been nice to see that this season's reset has created a number of new fans who hadn't discovered the show before, and are now going back and watching seasons 1 through 3. And we try to make this season be standalone enough in a way that that the reset would allow new viewers to come into the show and not feel lost. I think that frequently you hear a season 4 and you feel like, well, it's too late. I can't jump into that one. And this is one of those times where you really can. And then if you go back and watch earlier episodes, it'll allow you to appreciate some things maybe on a slightly deeper level, but it's still a lot of fun. Yeah. So I guess that for me, in terms of the what it is and how it kind of has evolved into the show that it is today, it's really not about it being particularly sci-fi. It's the character dramedy first, and then we have just the extra fun of all the sci-fi.
Well, and isn't it interesting that Warehouse 13 is another show that is very similarly grounded in real life, and your show and Warehouse 13 are, I think, the two top performers on Sci-Fi. So I think it's pretty clear that you guys are getting new viewers in.
Yeah, and so far, and we are. I think almost everybody on our staff were friends with the gang over at Warehouse, and we're very happy that their show has been doing so well too. And they had developed that one to be I think a sister show for us, and finding that similar tone and relatability. Originally we were supposed to air one after the other on Tuesday nights, but they got scheduling conflicts before we ended up shuffling things around. But it's nice that I feel like there's sort of, we opened up some new doors to viewers who would not necessarily be watching a traditional sci-fi show, that they're able to find what they're really attaching to are the characters in a slightly unique world.
Yeah, and we're particularly interested in the crossover. I was just speaking to Jack Kenny yesterday, and he said, I guess it was Comic-Con 2009, you guys started talking about it?
Yeah, I came down, Sci-Fi Channel takes over, one of the hotels down there, pretty much every year. And I came down the morning after we had all done our panels, and Jack Kenny was having breakfast with Saul Rubinek, and Saul had played Carl Carlson on our show. It was a very big part of our mythology in seasons 1 and 2. And so I joked, I said, gosh, we should do a crossover episode with Saul. And Saul said I could play both characters. And I said, would it be, is Artie Carl's twin brother, or was he pretending to be? Did Carl Carlson actually end up at the warehouse, and he was he assumed this new identity of Artie? And we started joking about all these things. And I said, we really could actually do a crossover for our shows. I mean, we're they were developed, obviously with sort of similar sensibilities and tones, and the fact that they're both, clearly it's secret government place with strange things that happen, and two investigators who have to figure it out. I mean, they're cut from the same bolt of cloth. It would be a fairly natural fit for us to do some kind of crossover, and so at first we joked about saying, well, maybe you guys would have something happen here that we could send Carter over to help out with some particular investigation, or you've got some strange artifact that you can't quite explain and you bring it to Eureka to sort of delve into it. And then we ribbed each other for, I think, several months afterwards, saying, well, if we do it and then we do it on your show, then it's your headache. I can just send my actors to you, and you could deal with the scheduling headaches. And then I think that, I don't know if it was as a result of us starting those conversations or if they were already having separate conversations at Sci-Fi. They called and said, okay, look, we think we really want to explore this possibility, and why don't you guys sit down? And so we did, and Bruce and I and Jack and some of our writers sat down together and sort of said, okay, what are you doing this season on your show? And we revealed our secrets to each other, and we found that there was this sort of midpoint where it made sense that we could send Fargo over to their world for a task, and he could have a little bit of a love connection with Claudia, and use that as a excuse to get her back over to our show.
Yeah, and it worked really well. Played really well, and got a big spike in the ratings too.
Yeah, it was terrific to see that they got a big bump on Warehouse, and we had a huge bump that we maintained it too. I think that people that really enjoyed the episode came back for the following weeks, and it's been terrific.
Cross-pollination.
Yeah. I mean, when it makes sense, I really think it's great. I mean, obviously those things, those kinds of crossovers can be painful if they're not the right fit, and I think that Warehouse did a terrific job on their side of it, integrating our two worlds and our character into their world, and then just Neil Grayston and Alison Scagliotti just have such great chemistry together.
Oh, yeah.
As actors, and they're friends, and they were having just the best time getting paid to basically hang out with each other and play in each other's shows and make out a bit. I mean, it's not a bad gig.
Yeah. And speaking about gig, okay, that's a loose segue, but you've got some exciting guest stars: Stan Lee, Will Wheaton, Felicia Day. How's it been working with these guys?
It's been amazing. I think that this season, one of the things that I wanted to do was be able to have our scripts be finished early enough that we actually had the time to be able to go for some stunt casting. And that was something that was difficult in the last couple of seasons to be able to do. So being able to have people of this caliber, people that we're fans of, come over and play in our sandbox for a while has been just really, really exciting. And Ming Na is going to be on the show. We've already had Jamie Kennedy on as well, and Chris Parnell is terrific in his episode. He's in our Christmas episode that will be airing in December, I think December 7th.
Yeah.
And we're circling more. and I love how they've sort of come about. I think largely just because we were fans, and in some instances friends. Amy Berg, one of our co-executive producers, was friends with Will Wheaton, and my sister Megan has been on me for years trying to get me to cast Will Wheaton on the show. And then Amy came on and said, "I'm friends with Will. He would be perfect." And we had this role for Isaac Parrish, and it was just sort of an ideal time to have him. And when he signed on, I think that opened the door to Felicia, because they were friends. They give this other character for her who will be in the back 10 episodes, Holly. And I was flying out to Phoenix Comic-Con, and they happened to put me on the same plane to travel out with Stan Lee. And
oh, wow.
I of course just was like a fanboy, going with getting to meet Stan and get to fly out with him together and travel together in the car from the airport and everything. And he and I just we definitely connected. I mean, I think he's amazing. It's very rare that you have the opportunity to meet someone who has sort of been an icon for you in your entire development as a writer, as a person. I think in some ways he's had such influence, I think, on so many people.
Now, is it true that he asked you if he could come back?
Yeah, I mean, it was hilarious. I think within the first 5 minutes of talking, we realized that we kind of liked each other, and he sort of took me under his wing. I think he's like, I'm his new pet project or something. My new BFF friend, Stan, but immediately he said, "So you have this great show. When do I get to do my cameo?" And I said, "Hey, if you're going to open that door, I am going to make you come and do it." And he said, "You just tell me when." And
that's great.
by the time we had spent, the whole day traveling and hanging out and going to the panels together, I went to his panel, and he tried to come to mine, but he was getting mobbed by fans, and security wouldn't let him come in. And traveled back, there was sort of the expectation that he was going to come and do a cameo on the show. And so after some months of trying to figure out schedules and what would be the best episode to have him come and be a part of it, we had a particular plot line that it was, I think, ideal for him to come in and just be able to do a great cameo. And I have to say, for me, getting to write for Stan on something that I co-created was that's like a childhood dream there. I learned to read Spider-Man comic books.
Wow.
So, being able to write something for Stan and then have him come over after his take and say, "Was that okay? Do you want me to make any changes?" I pretty much, even if they hadn't picked us up for season 5 at that point, I could have died a happy man. But he has said that he will come back anytime. He had a great time. And our crew and cast, I think, I've never seen them starstruck before. I mean, of all the actors and celebrities that they have met over their long careers, Stan was the one who, when he was on set, people were sort of all at Twitter and like, "Is it okay if I talk to him? Do you think he would sign it for me? Can I take a picture with Stan?" He was like, seriously, it's like you've never traveled until you've traveled with Stan Lee.
Very cool. Well, we do. We're getting close to the end of the time here. There are a couple of other things I did want to ask you about, if it's okay.
You bet.
First of all, this is a TV writer podcast, and I have some writing questions for you. And in particular, are there any writing books or resources that you would recommend to new writers who are trying to break in?
Gosh, I wouldn't have any right off the top of my head. I mean, I think the truth is I haven't read any of those books in such a long time because I've been too busy actually just trying to write the show. This has been 7 years now since we sold Pitch that I've been sort of with my head down in the thick of it. But I know that there are some terrific ones out there.
And I know everybody has a different path, but if you were going to give advice to a writer who wanted to break into TV, what would that advice be?
Well, I mean, I think that you have to be willing to just dive into it and learn as much as you can along the way. I mean, be passionate about your work, but you never quite know what path is going to lead you, to the place that where you want to arrive. I mean, for me, I obviously was it was a little more circuitous, starting off in feature film publicity, and then slowly, writing such stuff on your own and on the side while you were there. But it was an open door, and it allowed me to sort of figure out how things worked. Writing what you know, writing what you think you're good at writing and that you're passionate about, I think is always a good place to start. And then even if it's just studying the shows that you love and then trying to write samples of those shows, coming up with your own version of them and trying to show how you can capture a voice. If you're looking to be staffed on a show, that's an important ability, to be able to mimic a voice of another show, not just your. And then write that pilot that will really showcase your individual sensibilities and your voice, that will be your calling card as well. But I think that patience is probably one of the most important things. I mean, there are people I know who it took 10 years. I'm one of them. A long way of trying different things before you had one really hit. But being able to not get discouraged and continue to do the work and improve and get feedback from other people that whose work and opinions you actually respect, and be able to incorporate that constructively into your own work. It just makes you a better writer.
Very, very cool. And when you'd have a preference for when you're hiring, reading spec material or reading original material?
I'd like to see like a sample of each. It's good, obviously, when you're hiring a staff person to sort of figure out what their wheelhouse is, or who they are as a writer. So if there's an original spec that they have that really sort of exemplifies that aspect to their abilities, you want to see that. And then as important, I think, in some respects, is being able to see how they would write your show. I mean, that's always a little bit of the gamble, as you could find someone who can write the hell out of West Wing, but may not necessarily be able to write your show. And I think for us, we have sort of a quirky blend of as you were saying, sort of humor and drama and sci-fi tech talk and procedural elements and all those things. And so we've looked at samples of writers who have done things for shows that might be in some way relatable to ours, if not exact. And it's great when you can read a sample that someone has done, and you can see it in your head and say, oh yeah, this is an episode of that particular show. It gives you that confidence that this writer is able to say, okay, this might not be my particular voice, but I know how to write that and to execute it.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, we have 3 quick fan questions.
Okay.
One comes from Amy Berg, who asks if it's possible to quantify her awesomeness.
Yeah, fan question from Amy Berg. If it is, I would have to say that it is impossible to quantify Amy's awesomeness. So, that's your answer right there.
Cool. And Lou asks, does Eureka check out technology websites for story ideas?
Definitely. We check out all kinds of websites and magazines and whatever resource we have at our disposal, we will mine it for the latest cool stuff, because you just never know when some little thing will spark a big idea. We're never not looking for the next thing.
Very cool. And I think his last question we already kind of covered. He was asking about how do you balance the lighter and more serious elements of the show?
I mean, I think for me, it's funny, there are a couple of times, I think, when I've written scenes where I know that I'm walking that line between drama and dramedy, and where's the point where you slip into melodrama if you're not careful. And there was a scene that I wrote where Carter and Zoe were sort of processing this big fight that they had, and they're in the smart house and they're kind of making up, and the music and the score has been pretty emotional in the background, and slowly as they they're making up and everything's okay, they start to become aware of the music in the background, and we realize it's Sarah, the smart house.
Oh, I love that scene.
And Carter says, "Sarah, what are you doing?" And she says, "I just thought the moment was so sweet that it could use musical accompaniment."
Yeah.
It's like that kind of thing. It's like just walking up to the line of melodrama, then taking the sting off of it with a joke. Is how I see it.
Brilliant stuff.
Whenever possible.
Yeah. Well, so this season's almost done. And when are you guys back, and when is the show back?
I wish I knew exactly how to answer that. We air episode 8 tonight, and Amy Berg and all her awesomeness wrote this one, and I do think it will be a fan favorite. And after I hang up the phone with this interview, I am going to go down with my giant Nerf rifle and fire at Amy a whole round, a barrage into her office.
Uh-huh.
But and then I think that next week is the Labor Day weekend. I think they're either rerunning the season premiere or something else. And then I think September 10th, as far as I know, is our actual season finale, episode 9 that I wrote. And then we'll be airing a Christmas episode on December 7th, I believe. Mm-hmm. Then the back 10 episodes is still to be determined when Sci-Fi is going to air them. Again, I think we're all pushing hard for it to be in the first quarter if we possibly can make it so. But we'll find out. They'll determine things. But I think for the writers, we're just going to take off sort of over the holidays, about a month and a half if we're lucky, and then we'll just be, right back into it in January with season 5.
Yeah. Wow. I sure can't wait. It's just a fun show, and you're guaranteed. I don't think there's been a weak episode yet. Just guaranteed a great hour of entertainment.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. I think we've had a great time. We've had the most amazing staff that we've ever had this season, and our production team and crew and cast have just been, I think, so inspired by the new material that they've been doing their best work too. So it's great that we've been able to bring in new fans and that old fans are appreciating the season.
Yeah. So I guess that's all I have, and we've gone a little over time, and I really appreciate you taking this extra time. I'm sure everybody's going to love it, and I do wish you all the best.
Oh, thanks.
Hope Eureka is like SG1 and goes 10 seasons.
From your mouth, I hope so. That would be great. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. And that was my interview with Eureka co-creator and showrunner Jaime Paglia. You can follow him on Twitter at Jaime Paglia, JaimePaglia. And now on to my interview with Eureka actor Neil Greyston. Enjoy. This is Gray, and I'm here with actor Neil Greyston, who plays Douglas Fargo on Sci-Fi's hit show Eureka. How you doing, Neil?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a lovely, chilly day here in Vancouver. Curses, the summer left really quick.
Yeah, so this is a Canadian interview, because I'm calling from Toronto.
All right.
Yeah. And first of all, congratulations on a 5th season renewal.
Yeah, thank you. I know, we're all super excited. We haven't even aired the second half of the 4th season yet, so we've got at least, 24 episodes coming up.
Wow. Pretty cool. And boy, the mid-season went out with a bang. I was a little skeptical, actually, when the 4th season came and that big time shift happened. I was like, oh no, how are they going to get this going? And I've been really, really pleased with how the episodes have gone.
Yeah, so we're all super excited over on set with it, too. It sort of reinvigorated everything for us. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it wasn't, just like a cheap little gimmick that happened in one episode and was resolved the next was kind of ballsy,
yeah.
I gotta say.
Yeah. And yet at the same time, there's been ballsy stuff done on other shows where there was too much of a jump.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, specifically, I don't want to call out, but I did feel that the jump that Battlestar Galactica did, it really took a few episodes for me to get back in after so much time had passed and so many things had changed. But I think with this change, it was a little different in that you got most of the relationships, and so you were able to go with the few that had changed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, that was the thing about, like, with keeping, the 6, or I guess it's like the 5 originals that, went back in time, keeping them essentially the same people and having their relationships get sort of closer because they all shared that common bond of going, into a different timeline, I think really sort of helped everyone out just in fleshing out their characters. And it gave, I think, new watchers sort of fresh eyes for the 4th season kind of thing to come in. They can follow these people who are in a sort of new world as well. So they don't, people who are new to the show won't necessarily be lost because, there's these 6 people who are essentially lost in this timeline as well. Mm-hmm. And they kind of get to go along on the ride with them, I think.
Absolutely. So we'll get to Eureka a little more in a bit, but first of all, I want to get to know you a little bit. You're a fellow Canadian. You grew up in New Westminster?
Oh, I was born there. I actually live there now, but I grew up in a place called Port Moody, which is another suburb of Vancouver. I think our fancy little title was the City of the Arts. Very, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've got family in North Vancouver and Abbotsford. So,
okay.
Yeah, I go there pretty frequently.
I've got family in Abbotsford too.
Yeah. So when did you start acting?
I guess in high school, I was, pretty big into the drama thing at school, but professionally, I think I booked my first paying gig when I was 19 or so. And that's when I sort of, got an agent and all that kind of jazz, I guess, professionally since 2000.
Mm-hmm. And you've been a recurring role on a few shows, Edgemont, Wonder Falls, and Godivas. Actually, Small World, a guy I went to school with, Graham Clegg, was the showrunner for Godivas. I'm sure you know him.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a while, actually.
Yeah.
Nice guy.
Yeah, he's back in Toronto here, but I guess Godivas was in Vancouver.
Yeah, that was a very Vancouver-centric show.
Mm-hmm. So talk about when you first came upon Eureka. How did you come upon it?
Well, just kind of the standard actor thing. My agent called and said I had an audition and sent me the sides and the script, and I read it and I pretty much loved it right away. It was the script itself was so well written that you could see the show already. And that's what I find like a really great script. You don't need to sort of dig through all the descriptive, stuff and try to make the scene in your head. It just sort of makes the scene itself. And that's what this script did. And, and then I went and auditioned for it. Luckily, the director of the pilot, Peter O'Fallon, was, I had not actually worked with him before, but I'd met him before. He did an episode of Wonder Falls that, when I lived in actually Toronto filming that. We had gone out to dinner, a bunch of us, to a Korean barbecue, and he remembered that I was a big fan of the ox tongue because no one else wanted to touch it, and so I ate everybody's ox tongue, which was delicious. Uh-huh. And we just had like a fun sort of 20-minute to half an hour audition where he just had me do the role like 50 different ways, just as many random things as you could think of. And then I think it was a day later I heard that I got the part, or 2 days. It was one of those really quick ones where I left the audition going like, I didn't get that. Something's weird, because it was just felt really good. And then I got it, and the rest is history, I guess.
Now, talk a little bit about the Fargo character. Out of almost everybody in the show, is written as an over-the-top character. That must be tough to play. I mean, your instincts as an actor are often not to go there. So how do you bring that character in to this world? Well,
see, the funny thing was the Fargo character was probably the least developed, especially in the pilot. Like, there was no real description for it. Like, just going into the audition, it was all shapes and sizes of people. It was, young guys, older guys, bigger guys, smaller guys. It was just sort of this really open, like, I think the description was Warren King's assistant. And that was it. I don't even think it said like, nebbishy or nerdy or anything like that. It was just like, that's that. Okay, so just got to really bring that. And I don't know, I'm a pretty wacky guy normally.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just like the stuff that he gets into is just so ridiculous sometimes. And it's actually kind of, my difficulty is not playing it over the top sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Although there are plenty of takes where I have not gone over the top, and the one really over the top one has been used, sometimes to my chagrin. But yeah, I don't know, I'm just, I'm generally pretty goofy, so that's, a lot of that is just me doing my thing.
Well, and I think that audiences have really responded to your character. I mean, first of all, you end up being the punchline of a lot of the jokes, which, however you read that, people love Eureka for the humor, and you get to be involved in a lot of it. But your character has become more and more and more central to the stories. Talk about that progression.
Well, that one is that's like a awesome one for me, because that was actually originally my contract was only for 7 episodes a season, and like it was sort of sold to us as like, yeah, he's just gonna come in for like maybe 2 scenes an episode, give some information, and you know, that's it. And then they just kept on plunking me in. So I think by season 3, I got all episodes produced, and then, you know, I've continued with that. And I don't know, I guess they just, the powers that be liked what I was doing, and, you know, wanted to keep on letting me do it, I suppose. And so that's been a really fun one for me. And especially this season now with the whole time shift and with running GD and everything, I've got to really sort of flesh out the character and make him a bit more mature, which is a nice thing for me, rather than, because I think it was getting pretty close to him being sort of a clown rather than like a character. So now I find it's fun to sort of play him as more of a human than a cartoon. Yeah.
Well, and talk about then how with this new dynamic, you've had to balance even more. I mean, on one side, he's close to this core group that went through the time shift. On another side, he has to play the dictator that his alternate self has been, and yet at the same time, you're still comic relief for a lot of the scenes.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I'm exactly in the place that I like right now. I get to have all these different sort of facets of the character. I mean, I wouldn't want Fargo to become a super serious character and never, you know, get into shenanigans, because I don't know, that's just not me. Yeah. It's just been really fun to go into a scene and go like, okay, who am I talking to? Who's around? What's my demeanor supposed to be on this, rather than just like, oh, it's Fargo, he does this Fargo thing. Now it's like, oh wait, okay, so these 3 people are in this scene and they remember Dictator Fargo, and then these 3 people are in the scene and they remember normal Fargo, and how do you come to sort of the middle of that? And that's sort of been my thing for Fargo's character arc, I guess you'd say, this season. It's how to move towards the middle, how to still be in power and be able to take charge, but how to do it, you know, as old Fargo, or like original Fargo, and not as Dictator Fargo. Because that's also, if I were to go and just always playing the Dictator, then again, that would be going into like sort of a clowny, like, oh, look at me, I'm always, I don't know. It just would not, I don't think it would be as interesting. I don't think the character would be as human if I did it like that.
Yeah.
But it is fun to play that occasionally.
Yeah, so it must be a lot more interesting to play as an actor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what's your process when you get a script for a new episode?
Well, I read it, and usually there's, we'll have like a few other versions of the script come out, like a few revisions. So, and sometimes we'll revise it on the day. So I don't tend to plan it super huge. I'm not, I guess I'm more of an instinctual actor than I am I don't know what you would call it, but like a scholastic or method or whatever. Like I don't generally write out a lot of notes and, write out a character arc or anything like that, because I find planning too much can really detract from just like being in the moment and, having the proper reaction to everything. So I like to get, the gist of the story and know what's happened in the scene before and the scene after and keep all that stuff up. But, I don't get too scholarly with it. I just like to go in and, and be in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a chance to ad lib?
We do sometimes. I mean, we our schedule is so tight. Just like in filming science fiction in general, there's a lot of effects. There's a lot of other things that go on. So you really got to get every take. You want to try to make it, the best possible. But occasionally, like at the end of a scene, we'll just chuck in like something to make a little button, or maybe if we know we've got the shot like a bunch of times and they just needed a different little bit of the scene, maybe, towards the end we'll do something for the blooper reel, but it's not that much. I mean, our budget doesn't really allow for us to goof off too much, but there's a little bit of ad-libbing now and again. If anything, we'll take the scene before we film it, we'll go over it and see if there's something that just isn't really working with us, and then we'll try to, alter maybe a line or move a line somewhere or something like that, or maybe shorten a line, and then, of course, we'll ask for permission for that. We don't just sort of go ahead and just, just run over what the writers have done. We like to make sure that it's all done in a very polite manner. But so that's about as much as we do with ad-libbing.
Yeah. And what about pitching ideas for your character to the writers? Do you have a chance to say, oh, hey, I had this idea for what Fargo might do, or that kind of thing?
I think the door's open. I mean, I've been so happy with what they've been doing this year that nothing's really come up. They've sort of, if I have like a kernel in my mind of something that I'd like to happen, they've already thought about it. Mm-hmm. They're already, they've already got it, going on. So, yeah, but the writers are amazing, and they're very open to everything. I just they're much better than me, so I
Now, one possible exception to that would be I was reading in that interview you did with Steve, is it Aramo or Aramo? Aramo, yeah. That you and Alison Scagliotti had been pitching something to Sci-Fi.
Well, it was a lot of different people with the ideas for that. I mean, a few of the warehouse writers, when I first met them at Comic-Con, and said, like, we would love to have you as Fargo on our show, and it was just sort of like there was a lot of people, but me and Allison definitely did try to make sure that wasn't just a little pipe dream or like, wouldn't this be fun thing? Mm-hmm. And definitely tried to go around and make a show about how much we were buddies and how great it would be if we were on each other's shows as our characters. And apparently that worked out quite well, especially in the ratings.
Yeah.
Even I was just at Dragon Con, and I can't tell you how many people were just talking specifically about the crossover and how much they liked it. And last night I did a live chat for the mid-season finale, and that was a bunch of like, well, when are you guys going to have a crossover again? And it's like, yeah, I really, really hope we do. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. I haven't heard anything, but I don't see why they wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Because it was successful on all fronts.
Yeah. Well, I've shared a couple of times on the podcast here that I had never heard of Warehouse 13 until the crossover, and now I'm a big fan of their show. So I'm proof that it definitely worked. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that a lot. I just get that a lot in general. A lot of people who watched Warehouse never watched Eureka or hadn't heard of it, or just sort of had watched a bit of the first season and it guess didn't pique their interest. And then now they've come back for the fourth, and then they're big fans again, and they're catching up on all the seasons and everything. So it's like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. Now talk about the logistics. Both Jack Kenny and Jamie had told me that a lot of it was just, shooting in Toronto and shooting in Vancouver, and the shooting schedules really being at the same time. How was it to swing to one and then come back to the other?
That was a very hectic couple weeks for me, that's for sure. We were filming the episode Stoned that Joe Morton directed when I went over to do the Warehouse episode. So basically all of my scenes I filmed in one day, went home, got a little bit of sleep, got on the plane, or did I get on the plane that day? I can't even remember now. I think I actually flew to Toronto right after I did all my scenes. And then I worked. Oh, no, that was it. Okay. Filmed all my scenes on the Wednesday, flew in on the Thursday, did all my getting set up, preparations, things like that. Filmed all day Friday, every single scene. Flew back to Vancouver on the Saturday to do a photo shoot. Then flew back to Toronto on the Sunday, and then worked Monday through Friday, almost every scene. It was, and then flew back on the Saturday or Sunday or something like that. It was, that was hectic.
And for all our American listeners, that's like going LA to New York to LA to New York to LA. Big flights. Yeah.
It's not a short flight. That's for sure. But it was fun. It was nice being back in Toronto. I lived there for 6 months, and it was there was a lot more buildings than I remember. A lot less parkades and parking lots. And a lot more. Yeah.
Oh, and it must have been a blast being with Allison. Now you guys just met at Comic-Con last year, right?
Yeah, 2009. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But you've become fast friends.
Yeah, we just sort of I don't know. She came up to me at the sci-fi party. We'd briefly been introduced in the lobby of the hotel by Saul Rubinek. But then she came out to the party and she was like, "Hey, my character's like your character on my show. We should be friends." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And then we just sort of were inseparable during the party. And yeah, we kept in touch. She came out to do an episode of Smallville, so we hung out a bit. And I went down to LA for a bit in December and January. And yeah, we just sort of kept on keeping in touch and stuff. And so it was great. I got paid to hang out with one of my best buddies and work with her, and we have very similar work ethic. So it was like, all right. That's always the fear if you work with a friend and they're not very good, or they're just sort of like lazy or something like that. But it was a very it was an awesome couple weeks.
Very, very cool. So just a couple more things. One is that you've gotten to do a couple of really fun throwbacks. You were the Fargonator.
Yes, I was
doing a Terminator throwback in the first episode of 4th season. And then you got to wield a lightsaber on Warehouse 13. What's the most fun kind of throwback like that you've done?
Yeah, those two. I also got in the episode Monstrosity, I had the whole "come with me if you want to live" thing, where they made it look like I was a super awesome driver. Yeah, which is funny because I just learned how to drive standard for the show. I'd never done it before. I think I've stalled that car a billion times. But it is a toss-up between the Fargonator thing and the lightsabers, because Terminator 2 was the first R-rated movie I ever saw in a theater. And I was just, for some reason, when I first heard about it, I guess I was 10 or 11, and I was just obsessed with it, and I was buying like Terminator 2 magazines, even though I knew I probably couldn't get to see this movie, and I just thought it was so cool. And then when I got the pilot, when I realized I was working with Joe Morton, I was like, oh my God, it's Miles Dyson, and I'm just working with him. And then, to go and do the whole Terminator scene, even though I was basically naked except for a patch or something covering up my crotch, in front of a almost entirely new crew at night in the rain in March. It was awesome. I think it cut together really cool and all that. And then
it was hilarious.
Killing robot spiders while wielding a lightsaber, a makeshift steampunk lightsaber. That's just, I think that might be the most radical scene I've ever done. Yeah. Where it's just like, all right, it all fits. So yeah, those two are definitely my favorites. I've had a lot of fun this season.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very cool. Now, your character looks like he's the butt of a lot of the jokes, but you've got a black belt in Taekwondo. I got a fan question from Lou Sitzma, and he asks if we're ever going to see these skills on camera.
I hope I can bust them out at some point. It's been a while since I've trained. I think now it's been 13 years or something, but it's sort of like a bike. I still remember a bunch of the stuff, and I'm strangely, for how little I am active, I'm still pretty limber. So, I guess a lot of my sort of training for Taekwondo, and I was also in wrestling in high school. A lot of that goes into just like the little stunts that I do, that some of them you don't really get to see too much of. But I do, other than like the really dangerous ones that I really shouldn't do, they let me do most of my own stuff, which is awesome. And sometimes some of them all, if it's like, okay, so we're really far away in a helicopter with the camera and you're going to be running back and forth in this field, sometimes I'll let the stunt people do that one. What else? It was like, oh,
take 23.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last one is, what can we look forward to in the back half of the season?
In the back half, well, I can't really give any spoilers, but Zane and Fargo get into a little bit of a misadventure in the first episode that kind of informs one of the huge sort of plot arcs of the season. There's also there's more Beverly stuff involved, and those are kind of the two big things that are happening in the season thus far. I mean, we're only on episode 6, so I know like the thing that Zane and Fargo do definitely goes through the entire thing, but the Beverly thing thus far definitely is big in the first half.
And working with Stan Lee and Felicia Day, Will Wheaton.
And Will Wheaton, which is awesome. They're Stan Lee, he just came on for a little cameo, but that was pretty amazing. We had people on set that I don't think have ever come to set before.
Wow.
Like people from The Office and things like that. I think we had some people, Hellcats films on our lot as well. I think some people from the crew there got wind and sort of came by to see if they could catch a glimpse of the Generalissimo. He was a great guy, actually. He was really funny, really nice, like both self-deprecating and boastful, but in a funny way. He was really good fun to have on set. And then Will and Felicia are just a perfect blend for the cast and the crew. They're both really cool. They're both funny and sarcastic and really hard workers. And it's just, they're fitting in quite well. I hope to have a lot more of them.
Very, very cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. I know that you're one of the favorite parts of the show for me. I just love all the scenes that you're in.
Oh, thank you.
And I just love the show. I've watched it from the beginning, and it never ceases to deliver. Every episode is strong.
Oh, wicked! Thank you so much.
Yeah, we hope that it's not just season 5, but 6 and 7 with lots of cool episodes.
And me too.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Indeed. Cool.
Thanks, Neil.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that was my interview with Eureka actor Neil Greyston. You can follow him on Twitter at Neil Greyston, NeilGrayston. As a matter of fact, if you're watching the video version of this podcast, you can see right now Twitter addresses for 12 of the writers from Eureka and several of the actors. I'm sure they would love to hear from you, and you can support them by following and tweeting about the show. As we close out, I want to remind you to check out tvwriterpodcast.com for the latest episodes and information, and also the TV Writer Twitter database. These podcasts are released at scriptmag.com, but sometimes I release them a little early at tvwriterpodcast.com. So if you really are chomping at the bit, that's the place you want to look. You can contact me with your feedback and suggestions at mail@tvwriterpodcast.com, or you can follow me on Twitter at GrayJones. If you ask me, I'll follow you back. And coming up in the next few weeks, we've got more Human Target Writers, Covert Affairs, V, No Ordinary Family, and much more. So, until next time, I want to wish you a great writing week. Bye-bye. Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for script writing information in print and on the web. And by Final Draft script writing software, the entertainment industry standard for script writing worldwide.